We have a speaker right now who is relatively new to Beachbody. She started in September. So what is that, 6 months? She is now a 1-star Diamond Coach. So since September, she has been doing the work there. She also started out as a success starter, which means that she hit Success Club at least 3 months in the first 6 months of her business. I'm very excited for her to come on because she has some great tips for newer coaches. And she's from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Let's bring on Michele Neskey. Let's bring her in. I'll add her
Hi.
there. Let me do the lower third here. There we go. Michele, how are you?
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm doing great. And you know what? Last week, we showed your picture on the big screen here for 4-Week Gut Protocol. We'll talk about that a little later. But before that, let me just get out of the way and tell the audience like what brought you to Beachbody in September.
Yeah, so I am a physician assistant. I have been a physician assistant for 17 years. So working in healthcare for 17 years, primarily taking care of cancer patients, adult cancer patients. And I have always loved my job. I've always loved what I've done. But like most healthcare workers during the pandemic, it became very challenging, both mentally and physically. And last year, as opposed to 2020, 2021 was a really hard year for me, being redeployed to cover COVID units while still, taking care of my patients. And I was really struggling from a mental health perspective. I just was getting a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and just had this sort of cloud of negativity around. And part of that was, being in that environment where everybody was feeling that way. And so finally, I just kind of said, I have to do something for myself. I have to take control of my mental and physical health. I'm not my best for me. I'm not my best for my family or for my patients, the way that I was on the track that I was going. I gained 10 pounds. I was really engaging in some more destructive behavior, like staying up late and binge watching and doing all these things, and had a lot of self-doubt. And finally, I just said, enough is enough. I was first introduced to Beachbody back in 2014 after my daughter was born, and I suffered from postpartum anxiety and depression. And at that time, the Beachbody programs helped me significantly be able to overcome those feelings and be able to feel better and feel more like Michele. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to that because that worked for me before, and I know it can work for me again. And so I had been following Erin Hopkins, my coach, for many years, and she lives in my neighborhood. And I basically finally just reached out to her and said, sign me up for your boot camp. And she said, oh, are you going to coach? And I said, no. 5 days later, I was a Diamond Coach, and then was able to get to 1-star Diamond and be invited to New Leader Conference in Las Vegas. So that was amazing.
Well, let's not, go yada, yada, yada. I became a Diamond Coach. You put the work into it. So love that. I love that story. I always say that nurses, doctors, teachers make great coaches just because they understand a little bit more about health and the body. However, on the flip side to that, they're also the ones that are dealing with their health even more because they work long 12-hour shifts. They grab convenience food. They may not get to exercising. So it sounds like, you went back to an old favorite of working out, but then when Erin asked you to coach, you were like, no, I've got this. I'm good. But kind of came all back around for you, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that compassion fatigue, the exhaustion you have from helping others, everybody that you just mentioned, all of those professions are service-based. And it's so much easier for us to focus on the health of other people than it is for ourselves. And so really, I just needed to flip that script onto me and be an example.
I love that you said that because that's really the key to coaching is I'm going through this too. So let's do this together.
Yeah.
Okay, so take us to, you became a coach, and what happens when people, I try to have newer coaches on the wake up call sometimes so that people can understand that it's doable, it's possible. And so can you share with the audience, like, where did you put your energy in first? Because I found you on TikTok.
Mhm.
I found your reels and I was like, what is this girl talking about? So share the journey of you signing up to be a coach, sharing your
Mhm.
story and those vital behaviors. Okay, I'm out.
Sure. So my journey is a little bit different. I started a business back in 2019 called the Posh PA, where I help mentor students who are aspiring physician assistants get into PA school and achieve that dream. So I have been using the different social media tools over the years to really grow that niche business. So when I decided to coach, honestly, the very first thing was, like I just said, I focused on my own journey, my own personal journey. And when I did that, and I say, a couple days later, I became a Diamond Coach. What happened in those first couple of days of me recommitting and not only committing to my workouts and nutrition, but really getting into the community and having people there be like, yes, you're so great. Like all this support and accolades that I wasn't getting from my job, that I was getting in this group. And I just thought, everyone that is working with me right now needs this in their life. And so the invite became a little bit easier because I was at work and I started to feel better and I was smiling more and people noticed. And so I was inviting my, other burned out healthcare workers, and saying, you guys have to do this. It's a game changer from a mental health perspective. Everybody is so supportive and wonderful. Let's take control of our own health so we can be as best for our patients. So the invite became easier because I was being proof that the products work and the system works and the community is where the magic is, right? And so the invite to them is where I started. And so I started inviting my coworkers, and then I started inviting my family and my friends. I have friends that are teachers. I have, friends that are in different service-based industries. And I just asked them and I said, hey, I started doing Beachbody programs again. I'm feeling amazing. You want to join me? And to my surprise, a lot of people were just like, absolutely. Like, I need something else I need something for me right now. I need to do this. Some people said no, right? But most people said yes. And so I just started with people I knew, my coworkers, my friends, my family, my neighbors. That's where I started. That's how I got to be a Diamond Coach. And then from that point forward, as I continued to dive into coaching, I started having to share a little bit of a different story than I had been sharing on social media up to this point. So I'm super niched, and I'm talking about tips and tricks to get into PA school and all of this stuff. And I started to get a little bit worried about sharing my personal journey, about being a burnt out healthcare worker, about really having these feelings about my job. But I knew that it was really important for me to share my personal journey so that women and people like me could realize that they can have an identity outside of medicine. So, like Sandy said, I had been on TikTok, but I'm also a lot on Instagram in my stories. And when Reels, came out, started doing Reels, and I basically repurposed a bunch of story clips. So I went back into my Instagram story archive and I pulled a bunch of clips that I then strung together to create a reel about my journey over the last year, in 2021, and ultimately my decision to leave my job in December. And I strung it together and I put it to a trending audio, and that video connected and struck a chord with so many people that to date it's one of my best performing reels with over 100,000 views and had 100 plus comments. And right there was a connection with people, that were feeling the same as me. And so that's where the conversations really started.
You know what, I'm reading your notes because I want this audience to recognize that you didn't set out to just make TikToks and get, followers. You set out to share a story.
Correct.
And you pieced together your story with trending audio, and you had all these, comments, likes, and all that. So this is really about how you were able to convert that into customers that you could help. Because we never want to say that reels are a substitution for a real conversation, right? So that's kind of where I've been leading you. And I want to lead this audience so that we don't mistake, reels for the real deal. So go
Yeah.
ahead, keep going.
Yes. And, the reels are a starting point for a connection. So I use reels to drive conversations. So every single person that commented on that particular reel, I sent a message to. And I said something like, hey, Sandy, thanks so much for the support on this reel. It was really hard for me to put it out there, but I feel like it's so important to share my personal journey and how important it is for us to have an identity outside of medicine. Do you struggle with this too? And from there, the conversations just started flowing, and they connected with that. They connected with me. So, that's where it really happens, is after, the reel that you post, or whatever it is you post, whether it's a hard feed post or a story or reel, the connection is really there in the messaging after you've made that initial conversation. And to me, I like to use reels as a conversation starter, but also to share my own personal journey. And that's what I've done throughout the time that I've been coaching over the last 6 months.
So let's talk a little bit about all the tools that you use. Yeah. And actually, am I jumping around? Like you tell me, like what?
No, that's fine. That's great. So obviously there's a lot of different social media tools you can use. On Instagram, we've got stories, we've got reels, we've got hard posts. And so there's all different ways to use these as to show your personal journey and your coaching journey. So stories are great. So for me, I use stories as a sort of sneak peek into my personal life. So, or to even elaborate on reels or topics that I've brought up on a hard post. So, your stories are just more intimate, more personal, little insight into your everyday life. You can elaborate a little bit more on things. And that the people who are watching your stories are primarily your current followers. So the audience that you're talking to are people that follow you, or people that are your friends and family, and they already see you on social media. And so that's a great way to build connections with them as well, because they may respond to a story or a poll that you put up, or a question that you put in your stories. So I like to use polls and questions to increase engagement in my stories. So for example, and it doesn't have to be all about workouts and nutrition. It can be about the funny or the mundane things in your life. So my favorite example is my poll about peanut butter that I did in my stories. So as Sandy said, I'm in the test group. I was in the test group for 4-week gut protocol. And I was eating, unsalted, no sugar peanut butter. And my husband is obsessed with peanut butter, and he eats a peanut butter and jelly every night. And he likes crunchy. I like creamy. My daughter and my husband, team crunchy. So I did a poll on Instagram stories that was like, are you team creamy or are you team crunchy? And it turns out people are really passionate about peanut butter. And I had like 100-something people respond to this poll. And every person that responded to the poll, whether they were team crunchy or team creamy, I would send them a message and say, oh, hey, Sandy, team creamy all the way. I'm so glad I get to eat the peanut butter that I love while doing this gut program. I'm sure you've seen me posting about it. Is this something that you struggle with too? And so just starting a conversation, even around peanut butter, is a good way to sort of engage and connect and make a conversation with people. And so that's what stories are really for, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, you and I talked about you use your reels or your stories as a tool. Like your story of your journey and what you're going through is the tool that you use to engage people in conversation. So then, so take us through, you were in the test group, right? Mm-hmm. You were in the 4-week protocol test group, and I shared your picture last week. In fact, let's share your picture again from last week that we shared. So talk a little bit about this moment.
Yeah, that's That's my favorite picture. So
Go back,
flattering.
Jen, go back and put it back up for 1 second. So you went, you were seeing somebody about circles under your eyes, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
skin. You were going for skin issues.
Yeah. So I had a lot of skin issues prior to doing 4 Week Up protocol, and a lot of itchy, patchy skin, hormonal acne, painful, menstrual cycles and things like that. And so I was in the test group, and I used my reels throughout the time I was in the test group to show my journey, like show what I was eating, show that I could eat out, and then at the very end, show my results, and just say, hey, I suffered from all of these things, and I was told everything is okay on paper, and that there's nothing really wrong, or it's just because you're over 40, and it's hormones and all the things. And I do this 4 Week Up protocol, and all of these things improved in different ways. And I had to share that. I was like, I have to share this. This is helped me so tremendously. And so I posted a reel about that the other day, and that's generating a lot of conversations as well. People, like you said, 70% of people, suffer from food sensitivities. And so by just putting my story out there and my results out there in a 15-second entertaining clip, I'm now able to start conversations and connections with people.
So it's interesting. You talked to me about how when you are still a physician's assistant, right?
Correct.
You're still PA. Okay. So you before on social media, you were talking all about PAs and,
Mm-hmm.
communicating. Of course, during pandemic, there was a high need for more PAs, right? And people were burnt out, frustrated. Then you started coaching, and your following was still stuck on you being a PA. And you're like, wait, I'm doing this now. So was it a weird switch for people to start believing and trusting in like your new role?
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that? Or did you just do both? Like, this is who I am. It's
Mm-hmm.
all your story.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and honestly, I'm doing both. I still love helping students and doing the Posh PA, and everything about it is great. But I did have a bit of sort of an identity crisis when I started coaching, because I felt that if I went out there and shared my journey about leaving my job as a PA, and that I was coaching and all of this, I created a story that people wouldn't trust me, or my business wouldn't go well, or everything that I built with the Posh PA, and I wouldn't have street credibility despite my 17 years of experience, right? And so I created these stories that I assumed people would think of me. And at the end of the day, what I realized is that I love being a PA. I've always loved being a PA, but there are different ways to help people feel healthy than just through the practice of medicine. And so I'm still a PA, and I can still help people get into PA school, but I can also help people like me really carve out their own identity outside of medicine. This is for Michele. This is for, Michele, the woman, the person, the businesswoman who wants to impact and have greater impact on other people's lives, right? So I basically just followed Mel Robbins' High Five Habit, if you haven't read it. And she says, just do it anyway. So at the end of the day, I just decided to do it anyway and share that personal journey and struggle of having to step away from medicine, and start focusing on something that was better, not only for my mental and physical health, but that could impact so many others' mental and physical health. And so a lot of that was just sharing that through all my social media tools. But, again, showing people that what I'm doing works. What I'm doing is helping me, is helping my family, is, allowing me to make small payments on my loans, things like that. What I'm doing is working, and it's helping. And that's how I'm gaining trust with people as we go forward.
Now you make me have to put the disclaimer up, okay?
No level of success, yeah, or
Beachbody
income.
doesn't guarantee any income, any success or income from the Team Beachbody Coach opportunity. Each coach's income depends on his or own efforts, diligence, and skill. I say that because you epitomize the vital behaviors. Okay, you got the proof that the products work. You had people commenting, and even more people, and you started engaging with people. So you invite them to come do this with you. You help them get their own results. And then you talked about Mel Robbins and personal development. Like you're epitomizing the vital behaviors. And so if we can just spin the conversation that this isn't about, am I good on TikTok? You know, this is about, am I investing in me? Am I investing in me so that I walk the talk and I am sharing my story in all areas, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, conversations all the time so that people see the proof that the products work. I love your story a lot. It's been really, really fun meeting you, working with you. My table's wobbly here. I ask this question all the time of people that have been coaching, for 5 years, 6 years, and you've been only coaching less than a year, but do you feel as though you have some sort of superpower? Like what have you had to flex this last, 6 months of being a coach?
Vulnerability and authenticity, I would say. And, just being me. You kind of see what you see is what you get from me, both in real life and on social media. I think a lot of times we overthink what to post or what reel to make or what to do. If you just kind of take it back to yourself, you'll find that you have so much to share with people. And I feel like I just have the ability to take action and not overthink it. Like Mel Robbins says, just do it anyway. And what is the worst that could happen? And so I feel like for me, that's probably my superpower. And I'll just say one last thing about reels. I know that, everybody's kind of like either on the boat or off the boat for reels. And just to kind of go back to what you said, making a reel is a conversation starter. It's not a substitute for a real connection, but it's a way to sort of share your own personal growth and journey while expanding your network, improving your searchability and discoverability, and really being able to connect and engage with more people as we continue to kind of move on. But I always say, if you can't think of something to post, go back to your own personal journey, because that's where all the content comes from for me.
I love this whole do it anyway, because I started the call about commitment, and do it anyway is just like commit already. Like we are so used to hemming and hawing, from packing our suitcase to making a left turn at a green light. We're always just like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And do it anyway. If you doubt yourself, if you don't think it's going to be perfect, it probably isn't, but do it anyway. And then always go back to what worked. And it sounds like for you, you just keep going back to the story of you getting the product results.
Yeah. And every time, so it's great.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to move the call forward, and I'll talk to you a little bit after this call. So stick around. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. We are done with the call. Thank you to so many people that joined us today. I know that there are almost 3,000 people coming to Punta Cana. So if you're not on the wake-up call this morning, or you're flying or whatever, go back and listen, or go back, share with a newer coach, because her message was really clear about committing to the vital behaviors and piecing together your story all the time in different ways, with different audios, with, a peanut butter catchy pull or something. It is out there for you to do it anyway. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you here next week. Bye-bye.